Okay, algebra. So we're still solving radical equations here. This is example 2. I got 2 more problems. And these are going to be a little different than the first side, a little more challenging. The first one's not too bad, but it's a little different in that I've got square root equals square root. We can see it's the square root of 3x plus 2 equals the square root of x plus 6. Now, when this happens, when you have square root equals square root, we got to get rid of the square roots. And to get rid of a square root, you square. But I got to square both sides. So I'm not going to rewrite the whole thing. I'm just going to kind of put parentheses around and show that I'm squaring both sides here. Now we know a square and a square root cancel out, so I actually end up with just 3x plus 2 equals x plus 6. And that's a relatively simple equation to solve. I got variables on both sides, so I got to cancel one out, subtract x. So now I got 2x plus 2 equals 6. So now two equations, subtract 2, 2x equals 4, divide by 2, and I got x equals 2. I'm going to check my problem here. Remember, we always check these. So when I check, I've got the square root of 3 times 2 plus 2 equals the square root of 2 plus 6. So all I did was take my original equation, plug 2 in for x. If I do this, 3 times 2 is 6 plus 2 is 8. So that's the square root of 8. 2 plus 6 is 8. That's also the square root of 8. I don't actually need to calculate the square root of 8. If I get square root of 8 equals square root of 8, I'm good. That's the same thing. So I know x equals 2 is correct. All right, so let's look at our second one here. This is a little more tricky. I got x equals the square root of x plus 6. I've got x's on both sides, but one's in a square root and the other's not. But I need to get rid of the square root. I can't solve this equation as long as the square root's there. So, since I have square root equals, there's nothing on the right side of the equation other than the square root. I'm going to square both sides. So, I'm going to square that side, and I'm going to square the left side. Now, the left side is just x squared. The right side, the square root and the squared cancel out, so it's just x plus 6. Now, you might be like, I don't know what to do. Well, you should, because you learned this in the quadratics unit. What we got to do now is, when you have a squared, you have an x squared in equation, you need to get everything on the same side and make it equal 0, and then from there we can solve. So I'm going to subtract the x and subtract the 6 from both sides. So then I've got x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0, and now I can solve this equation. So what I'm going to do is I got to factor the x squared minus x minus 6. So when I look at that, I know it's going to be x as my first term in both sets of parentheses. So then I'm looking at negative 6. I'm multiplying a negative and a positive. So one's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. And they're going to have a difference of negative 1. So I've looked at 3 times 2 is 6. So 3 is bigger. We want it to be negative. So I think that's going to work. If I double check that, my outer is negative 3x. My inner is 2x. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. So I'm good. So I factored it. So now I'm going to solve this. Remember, we're not done. You got to split it and solve it. So it's x plus 2 equals 0 or x minus 3 equals 0. Solve both of those. So x equals negative 2. Add 3. X equals 3. Got to check them. You got to check them. So I'm going to check both real quick here. So I got negative 2. So negative 2 equals the square root of negative 2 plus 6. So that would be negative 2 equals the square root of 4. So negative 2 equals 2, which is not true. So this is not an acceptable answer. So x equals negative 2 is not acceptable. And we'll check x equals 3. Do not assume x equals 3 is right. It is possible. So I'm checking that one now. I'm checking x equals 3. It is possible that both won't work, and the answer is no solution. So don't assume like, oh, that one's not right. It's got to be x equals 3. So let's check 3. So 3 would equal the square root of 3 plus 6. The square root of 3 plus 6 is the square root of 9, so that is 3. So 3 equals 3. So our answer is just x equals 3 for this one. Even though we got 2 answers, we only ended up with one that worked. Now, it is possible that both will work. It's possible that one works. It's possible that none of them work. So do not assume anything. You've got to take a second and check. All we do is we take the answer, we plug it into the original equation we were given. All right, so that's example 2. I got one more video coming.